Welcome to the Sourcing Industry Landscape Podcast, powered by SIG.org and hosted by Dawn Tura.
Well, folks, welcome back to the podcast series. Today, I'm so excited to be able to introduce you to Mark Raffan of Negotiations Ninja. Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a great honor to be here.
And the reason Mark is invited today is, first, he's amazing. But second, he also is the winner of the 2023 Future of Sourcing Rising Star Award. So congratulations on that also, Mark.
Yeah, it was really, really cool to see. I'm very excited about it. Thank you so much for the award.
Well, it wasn't me. You were chosen by a group of winners that were previous winners, and it was hands down, you were a number one choice. So I am so thrilled about that.
That's kind of them. They're all going to receive a paycheck later from me.
I don't tell you who the judges are. And we're going to be asking you to judge this same category next year.
Great. So, I'm looking forward to it.
Good. So, folks, let me tell you a little bit about Mark. He's a procurement, sales, and negotiations veteran. He's an expert in negotiations, influence, and persuasion. He has coached executives and teams at some of the largest companies in the world, including Salesforce, Citigroup, U.S. Army, VSP Global, Visa, Humana, you name it. He's also been featured as an Entrepreneur, Forbes, Thrive Global, Supply and Demand Chain Executive Magazine, as a 2021 Pro to Know. And he's appeared on dozens of podcasts, including Make It Happen Mondays, The Brutal Truth About Sales, and The Insider's Guide to Finance. And Mark, you just recently published a book also, didn't you?
I did, yeah. 9 Secrets to Win Deals and Influence Stakeholders.
Ooh, I like that. So maybe we'll put a link in the podcast where they can buy the book. I think that would be great. But Mark, before we get started, we're going to take a quick break for a word from our sponsor. When we return, we're going to hear more from Mark Raffan of Negotiations Ninja.
Sourcing Industry Group, or SIG, is the premier global sourcing association and is widely known as a forum for providing thought leadership, networking, and training opportunities. Another central element of SIG is training. SIG is the parent organization for SIG University, which was founded on the ideals of elevating sourcing and risk professionals to deliver strategic value to their organizations and transform their careers. It was created at the request of SIG members who saw an educational training gap for today's workforce and offers one-of-a-kind certification and training programs for professionals seeking deep expertise in sourcing, governance, risk, intelligent automation, and more for themselves and for their teams. We perfected e-learning for adults before it was necessary. Our proven model for adult learners provides a flexible environment with online lessons, quizzes, and discussion forums moderated by expert faculty. Programs are offered in several different delivery models depending on you or your organization's need. Open cohort semesters start on average every 1.5 months, while closed cohorts for teams of 20 or more can start at any time. In addition, we also have self-paced or fast-track options. You can learn more about all of these offerings on the SIG website or by reaching out to one of our representatives. So make sure to take advantage of all that SIG has to offer for both members and non-members alike, because there really is something for everyone.
So Mark, I am so excited to be able to do this podcast with you. And I just want to say congratulations again on winning.
Yes, what a splendid goal and what a splendid achievement, and couldn't have done it without all the amazing folks at SIG and all the amazing folks that attend. So quite an honor. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and you're up there with some great names. I don't know if you've been to the website and looked at past winners, but some of the past winners of Rising Star have gone on to be CPOs. So it's pretty cool. Like Definitely. They're really identifying those, the movers and shakers in the world. But I've only known you as Negotiation Ninja. I don't know the original Mark. So could you take us on a little journey and tell our audience a little bit about you?
Sure. That's how I was born. I was born with the logo on my chest. My background is all procurement and sales. Started out right out of university in a sales job, then got into procurement. Loved it, fell in love with it, and about 6 years ago decided that the corporate world wasn't for me. I wanted to start my own thing, and that was sort of the birth of Negotiations Ninja. Actually, was birthed in a bar, in a pub in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, where I was complaining to friends that there was no great negotiation content out there. And as all good friends should, they held me to account. They said, well, don't moan about it, do something about it. So I had a few more drinks and I thought, I will do something about it, damn it. And I went home and went onto Amazon and bought all of the wrong equipment for podcasting. And that was the start of the Negotiations Ninja podcast, which eventually became the Negotiations Ninja training company.
I did not know that. So the podcast came before the training.
Definitely. Yeah,
You
absolutely.
were still employed at the time?
I was. Yeah. I was moonlighting on the side as a trainer for a while, and eventually started taking personal vacation days to go train and help procurement teams out, and then eventually thought, this isn't going to work. I'm going to have to make a decision. Fortunately enough, I was very, very lucky, and that decision was made for me. And about 50% of the workforce where I was laid off, and we all got big fat checks to go away. And I was like, fantastic, thank you for my startup capital. I appreciate that. And then I went and started up Negotiations Ninja.
So this has only been 6 years.
Yes, yeah.
And you've got quite a reputation, I'll tell you that.
Hopefully a good reputation, Dawn. Whenever anyone says that, oh, you've got quite a reputation, I'm always like, is it good? Right. I'm not sure.
You have, let's say you have multiple reputations. One, you're always smiling, you're always in a good mood, you're a great guy. So that's a great one. But
that's
then
good.
Also your training. I mean, you're standing room only when you do a session at SIG. Standing room only. And they're always saying, put them on main stage, put them on main stage. You want to hear more from Mark. So you've got a fantastic dual reputation. Not only do you deliver what you promised to deliver, you're also a nice guy at the same time. And those don't always go together.
That's very nice to hear. One of the main things that I have tried to fight against in my quest to deliver good negotiation training is the tyranny of crappy training in general. Yes. I mean, we've all been in those situations where you're stuck in a room and you're like, oh, this is the last thing that I want to do. I hated that feeling when I had a job. It was the worst feeling in the world, and I never want anyone to feel that way when they take any of my training. So it's a big goal of mine to be as engaging and entertaining and educational as humanly possible.
Yeah, and it makes the audience want to listen to more. And so you pull them along because they're like interested in every word. They don't want to miss a joke. They don't want to miss any of the concepts. They just want to be coming along right with you. But where did the passion for negotiations start? Was that from the sales side or the procurement side?
It's always something that I've had. I'm very fortunate in that I grew up in a family that was never afraid of conflict. And when I say that out loud, it sounds like a bad thing, but it's a good thing. Mm-hmm. If anyone in my family ever had a problem, they always voiced their problem. They always said what the issue was, which I always took as a normal thing until I started hanging out with people where that wasn't a normal thing in their households or their families. So I actually had to control that more when I went out than when I was at home. And I also grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. So I was lucky to be exposed to entrepreneurship from a very young age. My grandfather had his own business. His dad had his own business. My uncle is an entrepreneur. My other uncle is an entrepreneur. My cousins are entrepreneurs. So I grew up in a family where it was fairly normal and almost expected that you would do something like this one day. So I was very lucky, and that was a normal thing.
That is neat. Okay, so do you live in Alberta, Canada now?
I do, yeah.
You do? Okay, so that ergo the Canadian accent.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate it. I've worked very hard on that Canadian accent.
It's a beautiful accent, so no, you should definitely hold on to that. And then tell me about the book and tell me about some training that you do so everyone knows.
Yeah, so a book was just released, 9 Secrets to Win Deals and Influence Stakeholders, and it's basically my communication to salespeople from a procurement perspective of how salespeople really often derail themselves in negotiations. And we see this all the time from a procurement perspective where as a procurement person, you're negotiating with a salesperson and you're thinking, why would you do this? But you can't say anything out loud because you're making such a terrible mistake. What are you doing? And you want to help them, but you can't. And so this is my way of saying, hey, here's some help. Here's some way to be able to negotiate better. And I think for a lot of folks, when they go into negotiations, they've been deceived by the media and by movies and by things like that, where you see someone say some fancy lines on screen and it sounds amazing and the intonation is perfect and it comes out in an incredible way, and then magically, seemingly out of thin air, a deal gets put together. negotiation isn't like that. But so many people have been romanticized to believe that that's the way that negotiation is. And unfortunately, they've left out like 2/3 of negotiation, which is all about strategy and planning. And so naturally, whenever I see that, I'm like, oh, you're really missing the big picture here. And so that was sort of the intention behind the book, is to write and say, well, you've been led astray. That's not what negotiation is about. Here's actually what negotiation is about. Here's what you're missing. Do these things, you'll get better.
So is it written then? It's not just written for the salesperson. It's written for both sides, correct?
For everyone in negotiation, okay. Yeah. I had to pick an audience at the beginning of the book. When I went through my book coaching, they said, well, you got to pick one specific person that you're writing to. So I imagined a junior salesperson that I had befriended a while back that was always searching for ways to get better and it was a real person, always trying to improve. And so this was my advice to that person. But it doesn't matter what side of the table you sit on. You could sit on the procurement side, the sales side, project management. You could be in a leadership role. This will help all those types of roles.
So do you focus at all on people listening well in negotiations rather than thinking of the next thing they're going to say or counter with?
Yeah, I think this is a skill that the vast majority of people don't have. There are a few exceptions here and there where a lot of people do have this sort of innate ability to listen. And interestingly enough, this is where introverts often do better than extroverts, because they tend to just listen well and they're curious. So they ask good questions and they listen to the answers. And surprisingly enough, that's where the vast majority of leverage points in a negotiation are exposed, when you listen to something that someone is saying. So, for example, this morning I was running a class with about 40 manufacturing procurement folks, and they said, Mark, I want to find out more information about this business that I'm going into, but I'm only getting surface level information. And so I said, well, what do you mean by surface level information? So they said, well, the question we're asking is that after COVID-19, we're really struggling with shipping and supply and all that kind of stuff, and we want to find out what's going on with this company and why they're struggling with it. So they told me the question that they were asking, and then they told me the answer that they were getting. And they said the answer was, well, COVID-19 was really tough, but we banded together as a team and we got through it. Now, on the surface, that sounds like a nothing answer, right? It sounds like we're really not getting any information there. Mm-hmm. But if you listen very carefully, you'll hear that it was tough and we banded together as a team. So then we can't just let that slide. We can't just go, okay, check, that's the answer, because it really didn't meet the intent of the question. So now our job is to keep asking, well, what was tough about it? What was difficult? Where were the challenges? All of those kinds of probing questions are really important. But because we're not actually listening to the answer, and we're casting it away as a nothing answer, and then we're moving on to the next question, we've missed a major opportunity to dig deeper and to find deeper levels of information. So to your point, active listening is super critical. We've all gotten good at faking it, by the way, right? COVID-19 has taught us to fake active listening by sitting on Zoom and Teams and going, yeah, and nodding our heads, looking like we're engaged. But there's a difference between being really engaged and looking like we're engaged. And in negotiation, you actually have to be engaged.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So what tips would you give to someone who doesn't actively listen? Because I always ask people, maybe can you repeat back what I said in your own words to see if you've heard me and gotten the intent? Super powerful.
So yeah, asking someone to paraphrase back is very, very important, or you just paraphrasing back what you think you've heard so that you understand it. Because sometimes, even if you are actively listening to what someone is saying, you may not have understood what they meant by that thing. Because it's so often that we're misunderstood when we say something. So if you're unsure, or if you want to seek clarification, or if you want to just make sure that you're understanding exactly what the person is saying, my go-to sentence that I always say is, Dawn, I think I've heard what you said. I never ask for permission. I always say, I'm going to paraphrase back to you what I believe that I heard. after I paraphrase back to you what I believe, what I've heard, can you tell me if I'm right? Because I don't know. I just want to make sure. And then I paraphrase it back, and then I say, did I get that right? And then you tell me, yeah, no, and then we move on from there.
So what if you need to take a pause in your negotiations? Things have gotten stressful. What do you recommend to people? Or
Take a time out whenever you need to take a time out. Yeah.
Just take it.
Yeah, don't be a hero, right? I mean, it's so easy to get swept up in the emotion and the ego that exists within negotiation,
Yeah.
where you feel like you're forging forward and like, I'm going to do this, right? I'll show them. That's wonderful, and I appreciate the confidence, and I appreciate everyone wanting to do it. And it's okay to try a few times and give it a go. But eventually, if you get to a point where you're getting frustrated and you're butting heads with the counterparty, just call a timeout and make sure that timeout is enough time that you have to be able to process the next step that you want to take, or try and understand where the counterparty is coming from so that you can go into the next negotiation prepared. If that's 15 minutes, take 15 minutes. If it's 2 days, take 2 days. If it's a week, take a week. Take the time that you need to be able to understand the counterparty, prepare yourself for the next step, try and anticipate the next few moves, figure out where you may have gone wrong, where you need to backtrack on certain things, because that's important too. So don't try and push it too far and keep bashing your head against a wall. Take the time that you need to take.
So I have to tell you a story. One day we were in a third day of negotiations for a large contract with Verizon for 140,000 employees that we were trying to get covered. And it had gotten tense because we had hit sort of a point where both sides thought they'd given in as much as they could give in. And I just wasn't sure we were going to get this across the finish line. And believe it or not, they did the smartest thing I've ever seen. So I bet they're probably one of your past clients. Do you remember, can you hear me now? The guy who used to go around the...
Yes, yeah.
He literally burst into the room, the exact guy from TV. He walked to one corner of the conference room and said, can you hear me now? Walked to the other corner, can you hear me now? Third corner, can you hear me now? And then he walked out. And it just broke the tension in the room.
Love it.
Everybody laughed. I thought, oh my God, this was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant of them. And everyone was in such a good mood. It's like we sat down and we finished the agreement in like an hour. It just was the final piece that we just needed to get rid of the tension and have a huge laugh with each other. And I don't even think I don't know. I'm sure one of their salespeople knew about it, but it was fantastic.
And sometimes you just need to break the tension, right? So if that means cracking a joke, if that means going to a pub, if that means going for a walk, whatever it is for you, it can be helpful. Key tip though, don't crack jokes unless you're funny, right?
Oh.
If you're not funny, don't crack the jokes.
Now, in a tense room, this does not always go over well.
Sometimes it falls flat and then you get crickets and you're like, ooh, that should have landed. I'm surprised it didn't go.
So talk to me about the pre-planning, because you're saying a lot of people, what they're not showing on TV is the strategy and planning going into it. Can you just give our audience just a minute or two about what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, it's about understanding what it is you want in the first place. The vast majority of people that I speak to don't even know. They say things like, oh, I want a good deal. That actually doesn't mean anything, right? Like, yes, you want a good deal. Congratulations. Wonderful. So does everyone. Yeah. So what are the things that actually constitutes a good deal for you? That's what we're trying to establish. So do you want to make more money? Do you want to reduce risk? Do you want to improve communication, et cetera, et cetera? There could be a bunch of different things that you want from this to ensure that you get a good deal. So we're trying to establish what those are, but then we're also trying to break those down into successive, more actionable things that we can negotiate into the deal to be able to achieve those aspirational goals. So if the aspirational goal is to make more money, then I would say, what are you going to negotiate into the deal to make more money? Could it be increasing your prices or reducing your prices, depending on what side of the table you sit at? Could it be for you to improve working capital? Could it be for you to sell more things or use less things, depending on what side of the table you're on? So it depends on what it is you're actually trying to achieve. But when I ask people that they think of these superfluous sort of activities that really don't matter much in the negotiation, and I'm asking people to get really concrete. A key consumer example that I often use is the number one aspirational goal that most people have in the Western world on January 1st is to lose weight, right? That's what we mean as an aspirational goal. I want to lose weight. Wonderful. But now, what are the things that you do to lose weight? Well, you exercise more, you lift more weights, you watch your calories, you eat more salads, whatever it is that you end up doing, that's what we're talking about. What is it that you're actually going to negotiate into the deal to achieve that aspirational goal of make more money or reduce risk, etc.? And that is the fundamental thing that we start with in our planning process. Then you got to think of it from the counterparty's perspective, right? What do they want out of the deal? What are they trying to achieve? All of those kinds of things.
Yeah. So one of my pet peeves, to be honest with you, though, is when I was working and doing sourcing consulting, was getting a team that wanted to demand 99% on-time delivery, 99% fill rate, 99. And I would say to the team before negotiation, all right, so let's say you got 75% on time. How would that impact you? Well, it wouldn't, because we have 6 months of inventory already on the shelves. So you're demanding something that you don't really need, and you're making it hard for the supplier to meet your demands. And you're probably going to pay more for it as a result, because for them to make it to 99%, they're going to have, there are more costs involved, obviously, for them to make sure you never, obviously you don't want to stock out, but for the supplier to make sure they meet the deliverables, it's going to cost you more. But then conversely, when I go into negotiations, if I say to a salesperson, how much will it save us if we drop it from 99% to 75%? They can't answer me that either. And, and I'm a recovering CPA, as you know. So the numbers, I'd love to get into the numbers and the math of it all. And they usually can't answer that question. So is that a time you just say, take a break? Why don't you guys go back and let's sketch it out with your own teams and see how much you could save us?
Yeah, I mean, the vast majority of people we talk to don't know the ROI of the product that they're even implementing. So understanding that first is really, really important, right? What are the dollars and cents that we're actually generating for the organization? And if we change any of those success drivers, on-time delivery, early payment terms, those kinds of things, how much does that generate in return, or how much does that cost us, depending on what side of the table you're sitting on? Understanding the math behind the negotiation is key. I was describing to a person this morning, it's kind of like setting up a chessboard, so to speak, right? In order to play chess well, you have to know what pieces you have you can move. And you have to know how those pieces move. If you don't know what the pieces are, first of all, and you don't know how they move, you can't really play the game well. It ends up that you will probably always lose, because the person that you're negotiating with understands all of their pieces, all of your pieces, understands how they move, and have learned some opening moves, have learned some gambits, have learned some things that they're probably going to use on you, and you won't even know. And so when we get into that kind of a situation, it becomes very, very dangerous. And so what we're fundamentally talking about, just understanding math behind what it is you're trying to do.
Yeah.
We're just learning the pieces and how they move.
Yeah. I mean, we obviously, we didn't want to have crew waiting time, having crews that couldn't go out and perform their jobs. So, because that costs a lot of money, because the crews were expensive. And so for every day that they couldn't work, it was costing a lot of money. So there are certain things that we could never have a stock out. It was just, it meant too much money. So we would pay more for certain items that we had to have on time, when we demand it, or ship to job site or something like that. But the rest of the time, when you have inventory, it doesn't make sense. And then as people move to just in time, they're moving back to having inventories again, but they're still trying to keep these ridiculous levels, of on-time delivery. So yeah, so interesting. So I only have my pet peeves. I don't get to teach it any longer. I get to just remember and listen and learn from people like you. But I just love everything.
You're a great teacher, though. I've sat in on a couple of your sessions where I'm like, wow, Dawn should do this full time. And then I remember that you run SIG, and I'm like, nah, never mind.
Yeah, I did do that full time as a consultant for many, many years. But Mark, I just want to just congratulate you again. It's not a wonder that you were named as a Future of Sourcing Rising Star. You really are a rising star, and I can't wait to see where you're headed.
Thank you. It's a great honor. I really do appreciate it, and thank you for having me on your show.
Absolutely. And folks, if you were at the Future Sourcing Awards, you did not see Mark. He was unable to make it. but we couldn't tell him that he had won either to say, you need to be here. So I have to tell you, Mark, as soon as it was announced, people were cheering for you. And then they're all looking around like, well, where is he? Where is he? And they were
I got a bunch of text messages from folks saying, hey, where the heck are you?
Did you?
Yeah, I did.
So I hope you got the award. I hope it's made it to you in the mail. Has it gotten there yet?
Not quite yet.
Oh, no. I was hoping you could show it off.
It is nice. Jeff sent me a picture. It looks lovely.
It is beautiful. So when you do get it, make sure you post a picture of yourself with it. I can't wait for you to see it. I will
do. Absolutely.
Well, folks, this is Mark Raffan, Negotiation Ninja. If you don't know him, you need to have him in your network. If you already know him, you know what I'm saying. He's a great person to know. Reach out if you want me to introduce you to him. Just reach out to Mark. He always takes your calls. He always answers your email. He's on top of it. So, folks, put Mark Raffan in your network. Mark, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you again.
Thank you for listening. Subscribe to the Sourcing Industry Landscape podcast through iTunes or your favorite podcast app. Want to nominate yourself or someone else for an interview? Email us at podcast@sig.org.